Good morning. Let's do Luke chapter 6. Let's share it together, want to? And it came to pass on the second Sabbath after the first, that he went through the cornfields, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. Let's stop there a minute and talk about corn. Most of us know that the corn we eat is modern stuff and coming from maize and this tall corn plants. And this is, I guess, kind of the picture we get when we talk about them walking through the cornfields. But corn was a word to mean like a generic word, meaning cereal grains. So we don't know if it was barley, we don't know if it was wheat, although they did roast the wheat grains and eat them raw, or eat them separate with that. They made bread out of it, but they also ate the roasting wheat grains. So I'm not sure, but it seems like that's what they were talking about. Perhaps it was wheat, because they like to eat those grains as well as eat the bread. So they went through the cornfields, and it was the Sabbath, and his disciples plucked the ears of corn and did eat, rubbing them in their hands. So they were rubbing the chaff off and eating the grain. And certain of the Pharisees said unto them, Why do ye that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? Well, what was not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? Let's look and see. We can look in. First of all, let's talk about the Sabbath. The beginning of the Sabbath was Genesis chapter 2. At the end of the creation week, it says, Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And it was done in 6 days. And on the seventh day God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because that in it he had rested from all his work which God created and made. Let me tell you what 6 days ahead of that was. Everything we see was created. I mean, this house wasn't built. It's 100 years old, but not that old. But this house wasn't built, but all the materials for the house were put into the earth. Everything that is in existence that we know about was created in those 6 days. What a God we serve. But it says he rested on the Sabbath, the seventh day, and sanctified it. So that seventh day, our week starts on Sunday and it ends on Saturday, which is the seventh day. So that day was the day God rested. And he wanted the Jews, in Exodus chapter 20, when he gave the 10 Commandments, he wanted them to keep the Sabbath day. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Chapter 20 and verse 8 of Exodus. Chapter 20 and verse 8 of Exodus says, Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Now, when he created the earth and all that was in it, he did it in those 6 days, and he always said, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And then the evening and the morning were the second day. We always look at days starting in the morning, but God counted days as starting from the evening and the morning. So that's why the Jews, their Sabbath begins on what we call Friday evening and goes to sundown on Saturday. It's the evening and the morning. That's their Sabbath. So this is what the Lord intended for people to do on the Sabbath day was not to do any work at all, but to rest. So the Pharisees saw the disciples plucking the ears of corn and rubbing them in their hands, and they counted that as breaking the Sabbath because they were working. Why do you that which is not lawful to do on the Sabbath days? This is Jesus, and he said, and Jesus answering them said, have ye not read so much as this, what David did when himself was an hungered, and they which were with him, how he went into the house of God, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat, but for the priests alone? So Jesus is pointing them to another exception to the rule. 1 Samuel 21:6. We're going to go back to 1 Samuel, and we're going to see what he's talking about here. 21:6. Isn't it wonderful how Jesus pointed them to the Old Testament? 21:6. They didn't have the New Testament, so all the scriptures they had was the Old Testament, but Jesus was pointing them to the scriptures. And he said, let's read. Then came David to Nob, to Ahimelech the priest. Verse 1. And Ahimelech was afraid at the meeting of David, and said unto him, why art thou alone with no man with thee, and no man with thee? And David said unto Ahimelech the priest, the king hath commanded me a business, and hath said unto me, let no man know anything of the business whereabout I send thee, and what I have commanded thee. And I have appointed my servants to such and such a place. Now, David lied. He was running away from Saul. But he did. Now therefore, what is under thine hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread in mine hand, or what there is present. And the priest answered David and said, there is no common bread under mine hand, but there is hallowed bread, if the young men have kept themselves at least from women. And David answered the priest and said unto him, of a truth women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessels of the young men are holy, and the bread is in a manner common, yea, though it were sanctified this day in the vessel. So the priest gave him hallowed bread, for there was no bread there but the showbread, that was taken from before the Lord to put hot bread in the day when it was taken away. So it was the old showbread that they put fresh bread in on that table of the showbread in the tabernacle. And so he said how he went into the house of God, David, when they were hungry, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat but for the priest alone. So because of their need, David's need, the priest gave them that old showbread. And Jesus asked, have you not read so much as this, what David did when himself was an hungered, and they that were with him, how he went into the house of God, and did take and eat the showbread, and gave also to them that were with him, which it is not lawful to eat but for the priest alone. So they had a need. There was no other bread there but what they had put before the Lord, and the priest gave it to David and his men to eat. They were running from Saul, and they hadn't taken time to bring victuals along with them. So Jesus is using this as an example of feeding somebody with that bread, though it wasn't lawful but for the priest alone to eat, but feeding somebody else with it. And he said unto them, that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. Okay, now what is he saying? You know, another place he said, man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for man. And he wanted us to know that the Sabbath was made to give man a chance to rest from the 6 other days of laboring. And he wanted us to know that. Here, these disciples didn't have anything else to eat but the corn that they could pluck from the plants as they walked through the cornfields. And they were rubbing them with their hands and eating them. And the Pharisees were condemning them for doing what they called work on the Sabbath day. But they were getting them some food because they were hungry. And that's what Jesus was saying about David and his men. They came to the tabernacle and they were wanting something to eat, and all there was that old showbread that they'd taken away and put fresh one in there. And the priest gave it to them. And he said unto them that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. He wasn't just the Lord of healing people and of feeding 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fishes and those kind of things. He wasn't just the Lord of anything you can imagine, walking on the water, all the things that he did. He said he is Lord also of the Sabbath. So anything that is needing to be done that Jesus knows you must do to survive, to live, to be able to go on, you got to have food in the day, that he was the Lord of the Sabbath. He could say, that is all right to do. And he said it was all right for David to eat that showbread and his men. And he was also saying it was all right for his disciples to rub those ears of corn in their hands and eat it. You know, the corn, it was a generic term for cereal grains. It wasn't like our corn. They would, if that would have been the case, they'd be picking those ears and shucking them and all that. But this was some barley or some wheat, and they were eating it as they went along, walking through those cornfields. And those weren't way high up over their head. They were like down at their knees. So you picture that, and you picture them just going along eating as they go. And Jesus said that the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. So my disciples are walking and following me, and they're eating what they're finding to eat on the Sabbath, and I'm the Lord of that. So I can say yea or no, and I say yea. He was saying yea. Isn't it wonderful to know that we have a Savior, not just a set of rules, but a Savior? Isn't it wonderful to know that? And it came to pass also on another Sabbath that he entered into the synagogue and taught. And there was a man whose right hand was withered. And the scribes and Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find an accusation against him. But he knew their thoughts, and said to the man which had the withered hand, Rise up and stand forth in the midst. And he arose and stood forth. Then said Jesus unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? Now they wanted to say, you can't do anything. You can't do good or you can't do evil. You can't do anything. But Jesus didn't give them an opportunity to say that. He didn't. He asked this question. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? So They didn't want to answer, did they? And looking round about upon them all, he said unto the man, Stretch forth thy hand. And he did so, and his hand was restored whole as the other. His hand was restored whole as the other. So that withered hand was withered no longer. And on the Sabbath he did it. Because Jesus wanted us to know that it's lawful to do good on the Sabbath. It's lawful to save life on the Sabbath. Not lawful to do evil or to destroy on the Sabbath. Were they jealous for God's Sabbath? Were they jealous for keeping the Sabbath like God wanted them to? No, they were not. They were not. They weren't worried over what God thought. They just didn't want him breaking what they thought. But he had already told them he was Lord of the Sabbath. So that's the end of all arguments, wouldn't you think? If you knew he was the Lord. But they didn't believe, so that was why they always found fault with him. It says, verse 11, And they were filled with madness, and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. And it came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. Okay? So they wanted to do something to Jesus. They were so mad at him for claiming to be the Lord of the Sabbath. He was God's Son. He was God and the Son of God. He said that the Son of Man, he called himself the Son of Man, is Lord also of the Sabbath. But it made them mad, and they wanted to do something to Jesus. But Jesus didn't matter to him. It came to pass in those days that he went out into a mountain to pray, and continued all night in prayer to God. Have you ever prayed all night? Have you ever prayed all night? Have you ever had something on your heart so important that it meant more to you than sleeping? Just to talk to God about it? Get a hold of him for the need? When you feel so strongly about something, it won't let you sleep. And you know that the only answer that you can find is from God. And you search for that answer in the night. And as you search for that answer, and you get the assurance that he's heard you, that he's going to answer you, that something's going to happen, and it's going to be the answer to your prayers. When you begin to feel that happen, then maybe you'll feel like sleeping. But God's Son, Jesus Christ, he had a lot to pray about, talked to God throughout the whole night, and he continued there in prayer the whole night. So we need to pray. If Jesus needed to pray, we certainly need to pray. God help us to pray. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow. God bless you.